There we go. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started while we wait for more students to come in. Let's see. Okay. Okay, students, welcome to the second speaker series of Bridging Gap. Thank you for coming. We'll be waiting for a couple more students here. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Ariana Garza. She's an epidemiologist for the Texas State Health Department of Health Services, and she's a really incredible human being. And I'm very excited to introduce her to you guys and to have her talk to you guys. So let's go ahead and give a brief welcome to Ariana.
Hey, thank you guys. Happy to be here.
All right, so as we've done in the past, you can ask questions as you come up with them, or we'll go through some of the questions that we have prepared. So let's go ahead and get started. So Ariana, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to hear what some of your insights are on both going through graduate school and going through the challenges of graduate school, and also going through the struggles of an epidemiologist. So you're a working epidemiologist, continuing your education and trying to balance both of those things. I can imagine that it's very challenging. And so we're excited to hear about how you do this superwoman-like handling of all these tasks. So that's what we want to know.
Okay. Where do I even start? I guess that we can start at like how I ended up as an epidemiologist. As some of you are probably in the biology program, right? These are biology program students, right? Okay, cool. So I was also a biology minor, went through undergrad here at what was formerly UTV. I graduated with my biology degree and I had no idea what to do with it. So when someone talked to me about there is a certificate program in public health that could potentially lead on to a master's in epidemiology, that kind of like called my attention. The word epidemiology, at that point, like I kind of like had a vague idea of what it was because I was a huge fan of the movie Outbreak when I was growing up. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that movie, the one with the little monkey that gets all these people sick with like an Ebola type virus. And that was one of my favorite movies growing up. And so when I heard epidemiology, I was like, oh, okay, that kind of sounds interesting. I have nothing to do in the meantime, you know. So yeah, sure, let's do the certificate program in public health. And, you know, one semester in learning about epidemiology and the, you know, the effect of the disease in the human population just captivated me. And that's how, you know, I'm still stuck in it. You know, like 10 years, 12 years later, I'm still stuck in it. I've had many interesting experiences being an epidemiologist, and it's a very rewarding career. And what else? What else should I talk about?
Well,
A life in the
yes,
a day in the life of an epidemiologist.
Okay, so first let's compare. What is a day in the life of an epidemiologist pre-COVID?
That's what I was gonna say. There is a difference.
I've heard there's a difference. I wouldn't know, but tell us about pre-COVID epidemiology.
When you're an epidemiologist pre-COVID, you are trained your whole career with the idea that, you know, someday you might come across an actual threat to the human race, right? Like an actual outbreak. But, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you're just dealing with, small outbreaks of salmonella or chickenpox or, you know, flu in a nursing home or Zika. That was an interesting one when Zika happened. That was like a semi-outbreak.
And you were in charge of Zika.
And I was in charge of Zika. I actually got a chance, and I'll talk about this because I actually got a chance to work with the CDC, which is like the holy grail of epidemiologists. So that was really cool. But you know, when we got hit by COVID, I was like, oh shoot, like this just got very, very real, very, very fast. And you've been trained your whole life to do something like that, to respond. And at the same time, we were like absolutely not ready for it. Absolutely not ready for it. It pulled the rug out of our, you know, from below our feet. And we crash landed really fast with a lot of challenges and people dying around you and trying to trying to make sense of it. And the hardest part, and I was just part of a conference yesterday about talking about burnout and talking about mental health. The hardest part was balancing that burnout because we were working 24/7, just about. We had a family at home that, we still needed to come back to, and balancing that and still trying to make a difference in the way people around you reacted to the pandemic. And that was the hardest part. Like, you would think that being an epidemiologist, people would trust you, right?
You think.
And I think a lot of people didn't even know what an epidemiologist was prior to 2020 happening. Now they're like, okay, well, yeah, we kind of like have a vague idea of what epidemiologists are supposed to do. We still don't trust them, right? But we kind of like
we know what they do.
We know what they do. But that was a huge challenge. But at the same time, I'm kind of like fortunate to have had that education beforehand. So when it came time to deal with it, I had at least some information and some background to talk to the people around me and be like, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing, and this is what's right. And I don't care what you hear or don't hear on TV and social media. Like, I know for a scientific fact that this is what you're supposed to be doing, right? And then also realizing that you don't have all the answers and that things change. We were just learning. The virus was changing on a day-to-day basis, and we were just had to be adapting to that and telling the people like, no, I mean, we were not necessarily wrong yesterday, but it changed, right? So we were not wrong. I mean, we were not right either.
Right. And that's been really difficult in trying to keep the trust of society, because that changing of information makes it so that it's harder for us to be trusted, or for science, epidemiologists to be trusted in general. And people don't understand that that's the nature of the beast. That's how it works. We're always learning, we're always taking in new information and changing our perspective. And that's the beauty of science and medicine, is that it's adapting. I mean, how wonderful it is now that we get to learn about human bodies instead of, if things stayed the same as, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, we'd still be studying the human body and medicine as the four humors and never even dissecting a body, right? And so it's important for us to understand that change is a good thing, and that learning more isn't a bad thing. It's something that we should embrace.
Right, exactly. And because this will change everything, right? Like learning how the virus mutates and learning what it's going to look like the next day. It's going to change everything. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what it's supposed to do. Right. So do you want me to go to the next question? You want me to talk about CDC?
No, let's talk about the CDC. How many of us have ever even been able to talk to somebody who works for the CDC? Tell us about that.
That was the best job I've ever had. So sad it's over. It was contract based. Things happen, right? So I was trying to find a new job because when the prior administration came into play, there was a lot of cutting in funds for researchers. And at that time I was working in research. So there was a lot of cuts in research, and my research study was cut, and I ended up pretty much jobless, right? So I started to look for a job, and when they would ask me like, what do you want? And I was like, I would really like to be an epidemiologist for the CDC, but I don't want to leave Brownsville. Because I have a family in Brownsville and I can't afford to move right now. So that it kind of like sounded impossible. But one day I was, just Googling, and a job came up, and it said Zika field support consultant for a company called Chickasaw Nation Industries, which was a reserve, based company. And I was like, I'm just gonna send my resume in. So I sent my resume in, and someone calls me and like, Ariana, we want to talk to you about this job, the Zika field assignee. This is a job for the CDC. We're a contracting agency for the CDC. So we looked at your resume. It looks really cool. We wanna talk to you. I'm gonna give you an interview. I got that interview that same day, and this lady's telling me, it seems like you're getting this job. It seems like it's gonna be a go. We like your resume. Can we fly you out to Atlanta to CDC headquarters next week to receive training? And I'm like,
wow.
What? Like CDC headquarters, like actually the ones that you see in the movie Outbreak? And my eyes just went like, that's amazing. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, okay, yeah, sure. So I'm trying to, get my affairs in order, I'm going to CDC next week, right? Bye-bye everyone for a week, right? You know, I had to go train at the CDC for a week. And at this time was when Zika was happening. And Zika, if you're not familiar with what was going on, it's like, it's this virus that's transmitted by mosquitoes. And we do have a lot of mosquitoes in South Texas. And this virus kind of like made its way throughout South America, all the way up to Mexico, all the way out to the valley. And we started having a few cases of Zika transmitted infections. And those are pretty dangerous for mothers, you know, who are pregnant because it causes microcephaly and anencephaly and a bunch of other birth defects in the babies. So it was kind of like a big thing, and it put Brownsville on the map. You know, it's like, oh shoot, like there's a bunch of cases in Brownsville, and CDC needs a person in Brownsville to do education and to do outreach and to do mosquito control and to do vector control and to just, you know, be the voice of the CDC in Brownsville, Texas. And I'm like, that's what? And I'm like, that's crazy. And I'm like, it's kind of like I manifested that thing. That was the only time that has ever worked. So don't go, you know, go trying to manifest stuff. But yeah, so the next week I was in Atlanta getting badged in for the CDC, getting my fingerprints, getting a CDC badge. I got to go down to the CDC Emergency Operations Center, which is kind of like what you see in, and you know how NASA has like an EOC, and they have this screen where they are like, it's like a control room, right? The same thing, but at the public health level.
Whoa.
So I went down to the Emergency Operations Center. There's a bunch of people there working 24/7. You know, they have a huge map of all the outbreaks of all the diseases that are going on in the world.
Whoa.
And Brownsville, Texas is in red, right? Because there was a bunch of Zika cases. So then I got to come back and I got assigned at the Cameron County Public Health Department to be kind of like the liaison between CDC and the local health department for all Zika related matters. So I got to do a bunch of outreach in the community. I got to do a lot of investigations of mothers that were coming in from South America, pregnant with Zika infections. I got to see their babies born and do the assessments on the babies.
Wow.
And, you know, some of them, unfortunately, were microcephalic. And we got to follow up with those babies for 3 years. So my grant lasted 3 years, and I got to see those babies, you know, grow up and face those challenges that came from having just a transmittable disease, right? A mosquito-borne infection. So that was very interesting. I think that's been one of the highlights of my career. And then COVID happened, so.
Okay. So let's talk about the difference in what a typical workday would be like for you pre-COVID and then post-COVID, because we know that that's a huge difference.
Right, it is a huge difference. When COVID happened, it just, we all gears switched to COVID, and I didn't do anything other than COVID for 2 years. We're just right now, we're starting to go back to normal operations. So we're starting to get all these other diseases again, right? So you know, on a you know, normal day, we are at the regional health department. I'm at the regional health department. So I get to see all the incoming labs of all reportable conditions. So reportable conditions are, you know, diseases in the community that pose a danger to others, right? That could be either transmissible, that could be serious, or that we could prevent from happening, right? They're either in the water, in the food, or whatever. So we get those reports in, and we assign them to the epidemiologist that's in charge of those diseases. We have an epidemiologist who's in charge of zoonotic diseases, which are all the diseases transmittable from animals to humans. And we have a flu expert, which has, you know, does all the flu outbreaks and all the flus, different types of flus that you could possibly think of. We have a foodborne, which I'm right now foodborne. So I'm you know, taking charge of all foodborne illnesses and all waterborne illnesses. And there's high consequence infectious diseases, which takes care of if we ever were to have a malaria outbreak, or if we ever needed, I mean, got to have like even an Ebola person that for some reason makes its way into the valley, that would go to the high consequence infectious disease person. So we have seen interesting cases of things that we see here that are kind of like off the norm. Could be like vibriosis. That one's an interesting one. Whenever we get vibriosis, we all get excited because it's an interesting, and pardon here the insensitivity of, yes, it sucks to see someone sick, but at the same time, for a biologist, it's like, yikes, this is really interesting.
It is. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
personal interest in vibriosis.
Vibriosis. It's kind of common here because we do have a lot of brackish water in the coast. So eventually when we get a vibriosis case, it's kind of like interesting to see what the progression is. And got to investigate what the source is. We have to, speak with the person, collect their medical records, follow them up. And all of this information that we collect gets sent up to the state health department in Austin. And then from there, it goes all the way up to CDC. So it's CDC and then state and then region and then local health departments in the counties and the cities. So we also have an avian influenza outbreak going on in the country.
We do.
We don't, yeah, you
Nobody
didn't know that,
knows
right?
about that.
Right.
Thank you for letting us know.
So there's like infected flocks of birds currently, like in several states. And those are dangerous if they happen to cross over to humans, right? They're avian influenza, they're maintained in the bird population. But if there were to be a crossover, that would be bad. So what we do right now is that there's a bunch of workers that are being deployed to work on these outbreaks. And unfortunately, it's pretty brutal because once they detect an infected chicken, they have to eliminate the whole flock. So the whole flock gets culled, right? It's called. They have to, yeah. So euthanize, I guess. And then all of those workers get deployed there, and then they get demobilized, and they get sent back to their respective cities. And sometimes we happen to get one of those. Oh, they happen to live in one of our counties, right? In one of the Region 11 counties. So we have to be calling them every day. How are you feeling? Good, sir? Do you have any symptoms? Type of thing. So just to make sure that they didn't at some point become infected. When they do their job, they work full PPE, right? It's like, outbreak type. And I'll keep bringing up this reference because y'all should watch this movie seriously. If you haven't, Outbreak.
Outbreak.
All right. So it's when they come back, we just have to monitor them for a determined period of time. We have interesting situations pop up here and there. There's never a dull day. There's never ever a dull day. That's for sure. There's always something going on. Last year we had a monkey that came in because there was a guy somewhere in Rancho Viejo or some place that had a ranch with exotic animals. He's one of those people that just has a bunch of money. We don't know where the money comes from, right? We don't want to know. But they happen to have all these exotic animals, and they had a monkey come over, and that monkey was infected with herpes B, which is it's kind of like the equivalent of herpes, the one that herpes simplex, right? The one that we all have. But if a monkey happens to have an outbreak of their herpes and bite a human, the human will die. We don't have immunity to fight the primate transmitted herpes virus. So there was a huge thing, and there was because a lot of people wanted to, okay, we need to euthanize the monkey, and then there was like this huge group of people that all of a sudden became like super animal aware, right? Like, no, you cannot kill Charlie, right? And there was like this whole movement on social media, like save Charlie, and we're like over here in Help Permit, we just want to try to do the right thing here. Like there was a kid that was exposed to the monkey where nobody even cared about the kid. They never asked, hey, how's the 2-year-old going? No, it's like, don't kill Charlie. It's like, it does put you in a lot of situations where like, well, what would you do, right? You try to do the right thing with the information you have at hand. They didn't euthanize the monkey. They treated him, and they had like all these vaccinations for him, and he's currently alive and well. He actually has a girlfriend.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And so this is really important that you bring this up, because information like this, I hadn't heard about this. And when you hear about situations like this, it really makes you wonder, why is it that, as a society, we were so invested in the well-being of the animal, but not the child, the vulnerable person that was injured by this animal.
Right, and the whole point of being an epidemiologist is always going to be the public health of most of the people. It's not even like, I don't care about an individual person. Like, yes, we use individual data, but in reality, the overarching thing is everybody, right? It's the health of the overall population in general. How do you make it better? How do you prevent disease from happening? And from there, take it from there. And inform, like there's so much ignorance, unfortunately, because we don't look at public health as something that we all should know about.
Right. And it's something that with COVID we've learned is something that we should be more informed about, and that we should be taking more active maybe roles in our own understanding of public health and maybe our own health
Yeah,
too.
and how disease happens, right? And
Yeah.
how it comes to be. Where do viruses come from? Where does bacteria come from? Where can in my house, where can I find bacteria that is dangerous for me and my family, right? We have a lot of unfortunate, very sad scenarios all the time of that are just caused by ignorance, very high consequence diseases such as rabies, right? We do have some cases of rabies that happen to pop, and those are very sad because once the person realizes they have rabies, it's a dead end street. There's nothing to do about it, but there could have been measures that could have been taken to prevent it. We had a very sad case of a little boy, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, died of rabies because he got bit by a bat, and the mom didn't know that bats could transmit rabies. So he got bit by a bat. Okay, Miko, put some Vicks type of thing.
Oh.
And sadly, a month later, the little boy started developing symptoms. And by the time you develop symptoms of rabies, there's nothing to do. Right. And it's information, right? It's information that we all should have. And so we try to improve that communication.
Yeah, that's something that I think that we would all benefit from if we all were able to not only have more access to information, because I feel like with the internet,
We have
information is
access.
totally accessible.
It's the quality of the information.
Quality of information, the intimidation of reaching the correct information, because sometimes I feel like whenever I was, you had experience working with, epidemiology before COVID started.
Mhm.
We met each other working at the Cameron County Public Health Department.
Right.
When I started, I had no idea what anything was. So looking up those CDC protocols, they're kind of complicated. They're not written for the layperson. They're not written for anybody to understand. And I think that that's a huge problem where, the leading organization that's providing public health information is not providing it in a way that's accessible for everybody.
Right. And that's where, we come in and try to translate that information to the public. That's where health promoters come in too, promotoras and things like that, people that can reach your population and tell them in simple terms, like, hey, don't do this. This is bad for you.
This will kill you. Right.
And
And so that's really important for us to have these translators, these community translators. And so we thank you for your job and your effort in promoting education and information, because that's how we combat these kinds of things. It's with information and education.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. And so just for perspective, what was a day like under COVID times?
Under COVID times, it was brutal. It was brutal. There was reports coming. When you usually get 1 or 2 reports of reportable diseases a day, we're getting thousands. And like, what do you do? It's just a matter of documenting, trying to call a few of them, trying to tell them to stay home. And there was no end to it. And that's what got really hard very fast. Because, by the time you look at the clock, it was already 9-10 p.m. and you were still in the office.
Yeah.
And you went home and I was on call. So I went home and it was as if I hadn't gone home, because I just kept getting calls all night of people like, my husband's sick. Should I take him to the hospital? And you're trying to I don't know. Yes. It was very hard. And it lasted for a good few months. The hard part of it. Eventually, we realized that we couldn't do everything, and we started to pull back a little bit. And we're like, we're not gonna get to you. We're not gonna get to all the 2,000 people that were coming in a day. We're not. And in public, we're really angry and frustrated. Like, what do you mean? No one has called me to do my investigation. Well, you already know what you should do. Stay home until you feel better. If you feel really sick, go to the hospital, right? But people were like, oh, the health department is not doing enough. And this was everywhere. We just did not have the resources to keep up.
Right.
And right now we're starting to try to come up with contingency plans to how to make our communities more resilient. Should this happen again, what plans are we going to have in place? And we're supposed to have plans in place. We're emergency preparedness. That's my program, is emergency preparedness. And there's you have plans up to a certain extent. But there's still a lot of things that you cannot predict. For example, if you have a weather app on your phone, how far ahead do you predict your weather, or are you able to predict your weather? Maybe 5-10 days.
Yeah.
10 days max, I think, is what your app lets you do. So, okay, we have an idea of what it's going to look like in the next 10 days, but after that, it's like, who knows, right? So you have a certain amount of contingency plans that you can rely on, but you have to also know that things are very fluid, and it might just pull the rug from under your feet, and you're just going to have to do the best you can with what you have.
Right. And I feel like while we were there, I think that a lot of it was just we're basically making up the protocols as we go because we hadn't had to deal with something so highly transmissible that was airborne before, I think.
Right.
And
It was a new animal.
Totally new, and the types of, the symptoms that we had to look out for, I think that was definitely unusual.
It was changing constantly. Like at first we didn't know that not having taste or smell, I mean, your sense of smell or taste was a symptom. And there was a bunch of people at the health department that couldn't taste or smell anything for some reason. And then we were like, oh, they were positive COVID.
Right, right. And all of these things, it was just, observation. Oh, hey, this, I noticed this. And then, you know what? The CDC is now reporting this is a thing.
Right, this is now a thing. So it's also using information, like there has to be data available for you to be able to gear your response efforts. So, it's a chain, you have to get the data first, and that's why it's important to do as many investigations as possible, right? At first we're like, well, why are you trying to investigate all these people? And why are you asking them like all these questions? And I'm like, well, this is kind of important, right? This is what's gonna guide our guidances. This is what's going to inform our guidances so that we give the people evidence-based solutions and prevention measures. So that's how it is.
Yeah, and that's one, as you said, without this information, we can't make adjustments that are necessary. So for example, a lot of people were wondering why we were able to make adjustments, for example, to the quarantine period. So we after a bunch of investigations, we found that first of all, infectious the time that you're infectious or contagious is only for the first maybe couple of days, maybe up to 6 days, and then after that you're not really contagious anymore.
And that's how the CDC guidance kept being like shortened up, and it went from 2 whole weeks to 1 week, and then to 10 days, and now it's just 5
days, right?
So and we're good. Like, and then also the virus has changed. Like the transmissibility of the virus has changed as well to make it more fast. I mean, the virus doesn't want the host to die; it just wants to, move on to the next one.
Yes, that is exactly. If you're here from my 1407 class, it's exactly what we were talking about in class. The virus, the pathogen doesn't want the host to die. They want to continue to invade hosts, and so you can't do that if you're killing your host. And so that's
evolution.
It's just evolution. And so that's this wonderful thing that we were just talking about earlier, how pathogens tend to evolve towards mildness because there's a trade-off between competition amongst other pathogens,
right,
and being able to survive within the host and continue to propagate within the host. And if you kill all your hosts, well, then
you're gone too.
You're gone too. Exactly.
It's like us killing planet Earth, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, I guess I can talk to you about also my academic life. Right?
Yes, let's get into that now.
So epidemiology is extremely broad. Public health is just a huge beast. There's many fields that you can go into. Then a lot of it relates to public health. Like that's the overall thing. But think about all the things that constitute a healthy person. You have mental health, you have, spiritual well-being, you have dangers that are outside of your control, like, the city you live in, and violence, and other behavioral risk factors like smoking and drinking and all those nasty habits. And then you have what's inside of you, like your genetics. There's a huge genetic component, the way your body reacts to infections, the infections that are currently going on around you. So all of those are different fields. Someone brainwashed me into going into the PhD in epidemiology. I already had my master's in public health, but someone said, hey, maybe you should get a PhD in epidemiology. I'm like, sure, why not? Okay, I regret it, but now I'm almost done, 8 years later. And my focus right now is I'm studying liver disease, which is a highly prevalent public health issue obviously because of obesity and sedentarism. So that goes into chronic, you know, it's not always infectious pathogens, but these are chronic diseases that we are responsible for because of our behaviors, and a lot of, a lot of it because of our genetics too. So the whole other component of public health. So right now I'm studying liver fat content, and the genetics of it. Like what are the genetic susceptibilities to liver fat, and what are the phenotypic influences on liver fat, such as, your metabolic components, your metabolic health, obesity, and other risk factors such as physical activity, alcohol consumption, smoking, etc. So that's what my dissertation is currently focusing on, hoping to defend my proposal. Maybe I can invite you guys to my proposal defense
Yeah.
if I set a date for the next couple of, no promises, maybe next month, but I can send you a link, and maybe they can get to see a dissertation proposal. And that's the dissertation proposal defense. Like that's first step one. So first I need to tell them, this is what I want to do. They need to be okay with it. And then I do it. And then you defend it one more time. I don't know why it can't defend itself, but
Right? Oh, I think it's a part of the struggle. I think they just want to make sure that you're able to stand up for
stand
it.
up for it. Yeah, it should be able to stand up for itself.
Yeah, the process is it's a fun experience. You get grilled really, really intensely. So hopefully you'll be very, very prepared for that. I think that you will be. Yeah, so as a graduate student, would you say that the experience is like a happy-go-lucky Disney happy ending kind of
I would be
experience?
lying. I would be lying through my teeth if I told you that it is a wonderful, fun-filled experience. And it's not, and it has to do with a lot of factors. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that have a very positive graduate school experience. I'm pretty sure there are. But it's a struggle, and it's a struggle that gets progressively harder or easier depending on decisions that you take. Like, just make sure if you are planning on going into grad school that you have a very strong advisor behind you, something that you can really, really trust, that that they have your best interests in mind, and that they care about what you want and not so much about what they want. It's very, very important that you have a good relationship with your advisors, and because your success depends on them a lot.
Yes, and I think that one of the things that people struggle with is they pick advisors based on what cool projects they're doing versus how they get along with
Right.
them, and personalities jiving is one of the most important things to this relationship, because it is a relationship.
It is a relationship.
You form this friendship that's interdependent because both of you need each other's help. The advisor needs you to write and accumulate data so that they can publish,
Right.
and you need to do the same
And you
thing.
need to
but
graduate.
You need to graduate, and you need their guidance because you've never done this before.
Right.
And so I think that it's really important for us to talk about this. You don't choose advisors based on who's doing the coolest thing, but
Yeah.
who you're compatible with, because that makes the biggest difference. And, in a lot of graduate programs, people do end up, not completing it because of issues like this.
With their
And
advisors, right?
I think that we need to discuss this a little bit more, that, compatibility is something that should be focused on a little bit more so than, how exciting a project is, or
Yeah.
who has more grant funding.
Yeah, exactly. Or who has time, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
times you go to your department chair and they're like, oh, well, this guy doesn't have anything going on right now. Maybe you should just pair up with him and see what you can do, right? And that's how I ended up with the first advisor that didn't work out. It won't work out.
Right.
It won't, because you don't have any compatibility with what they're trying to do. I mean, you don't have any interest. You need to have an interest. Like, you need to care about the projects that they're putting on your table, because if you don't care about them, you're going to suffer.
That's right. And I think that's something that the students need to hear, that when you're going through these programs, that if you're not finding yourself interested in the project, immersed in the project, immersed in the ideas, and
passionate about it, you need to have some passion.
Exactly. Yeah, if you don't have that, then you're just forcing yourself to go through these motions.
You're swimming against the current.
Exactly. And that's not enjoyable, because part of the education process is is a transformative process, and it shouldn't be easy, but it also shouldn't be impossibly painful.
Right. Yeah, and we need to talk about Bruno.
We need to talk about Bruno. So what is Bruno? Let's talk about Bruno. What don't we talk about in graduate
School mental health, your
Mhm.
your well-being, it's important too. And it's I think we need to move away from grad school having to be an incredibly painful experience. We need to be a little bit more aware of each other's well-beings.
Oh, Valeria. Thank you, Valeria. Yes. Yes.
Definitely.
Mental health is really important. We don't address it at all. And so many people that we know of are just going through pretty much mental breakdowns because it is really, really difficult. And I mean, I don't know how, I mean, we just talked about this before. How many times you can count how many times we decided, I quit, I quit, I quit.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes. How many times I'm going to go be a comedian. Screw this. I'm going to go be a farmer. Screw this. I'm going to go be a tour
What am I
guide.
even doing here? You regret all of your life choices up to this point, and because you just got your ass chewed up by an advisor that told you that what you're doing is completely wrong.
Right.
And you're like, well, what am I doing here then?
What am I doing here? I have friends in oil fields making 6 figures. What am I doing here? Right.
Yeah, so we need to address, I think that's something that we need to address. And as we invade the world of academia, the new generation, I think we just need to be more aware of each other and be aware that we are all humans, and we are in this field because we love it. Like, I really love being an epidemiologist. When I was little, I always said that I either wanted to be a doctor. That was one of my ideas. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a scientist. I had a lab set that my mom bought for me with a microscope and my little bathrobe thing, the lab coat. And I also wanted to be a detective. Like, I was crazy about CSI, and if you put all those things together, you get an epidemiologist. I'm a disease detective and a scientist, right? So I really love doing this, but it's not an easy field to succeed in. There's a lot of barriers. Obviously, we have perhaps limited resources. I think we're evolving. There's the School of Public Health. We have a regional campus here in Brownsville, and it's part of UT Health Science Center Houston. And as we become a more virtual community, now we have a lot more resources available for us, for public health students in the Brownsville regional campus, right? We have a lot more access to a lot more things, a lot more cool projects, and there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of remote jobs now. I'm pretty sure if I don't have the mental capacity right now to go and look for a remote job at CDC, but I'm pretty sure that if I go look for another job at the CDC in a remote fashion, I might be able to find one. I just need to get my PhD out of the way first before I move on to other career endeavors. But it's a very exciting field. And after 2020, after the COVID scare, I think it's just gonna blow up. I think there's more people aware that epidemiologists are here, and that we do something that matters. And I think it's a very exciting career field to go into at this time.
I think so too. I think that this is something that's going to be growing because we're starting to realize how with increased transport, travel, the transmission or movement of goods, shipping, like your agricultural transportation of foods and everything, we're going to have an increase of transmission of disease. And so we need to be prepared to handle it. And, this time we weren't, but
maybe we will do better next time. Hopefully it doesn't happen within my lifetime. I've had enough.
Hopefully, but thank you so much for that information. So does anybody online have any questions for Ariana? Any questions at all? If not, we will continue talking here.
Yeah, I'm trying to read the questions that you had written there.
So if anybody was considering like a career in epidemiology, what would you say to them?
I would say go for it. And I would refer them to the School of Public Health here in Brownsville. They do have a dual degree right now going on that I think it's pretty cool. It's a master's in public health with a master's in biomedical informatics. And you do both at the same time. So when you graduate, you get 2 masters. So that's, I
awesome.
think that, I mean, I'm like, oh, how great, you come up with this stuff once I'm already done with it, right? So,
Oh,
I think it's something to take advantage of. Biomedical informatics is,
that's the
thing.
future. That is the future.
It's the
And those
thing.
people make money,
Those
y'all.
people make money, and there's a lot of career opportunities. So if you don't make it as a master's in public health, you make it as a biomedical informatics, and it's just the way that we manage medical information in thousands of different ways. And there's a huge genetic component to it, and it's super interesting. Genetics, it's like a whole other animal, you know that. Very cool. And so I think that's a really good thing to take advantage of. It's, 2 years, maybe 3 max if you take it really slow. But I think that's a good one to have. And then after that, if you get brainwashed like I did to do the PhD in epidemiology, that's there's a PhD in epidemiology, but there's also a PhD in biostatistics. If you have a strong feeling about math and statistics, this is a reality. Statistics is a huge part of public health. So if you absolutely hate statistics, then it might not be the best alternative. You have to have some sort. I have a love-hate relationship with it, so it's acceptable. I hate it, but I love it when I run a model and it shows exactly what I thought it was going to show me. Like, yep, I knew that was causing this increase in disease was this particular factor. And when you can prove that with numbers, with statistics, with p-values, you're like, this is significant. Yay. And if not, you can just sit and cry. That's fine.
You see, that's why you learn the statistical part in your bio 2 classes, guys. That's why you do it, so that you can get to this level and either do it well or cry or both.
Fail miserably. Yeah.
Or both.
And it's good. I mean, a failed model is not that you failed, it's just that what you thought was going to happen is just not there, right? And so you were wrong. So what's your next hypothesis? Let's move on, right? Okay, this was not it, scratch. What's my next hypothesis, right?
Right.
It's if it doesn't give you what you wanted to give it, it's not necessarily that you're wrong. It's just like there's another thing.
There's
that
more
you're not looking-
information.
yeah.
There's more information to consider when making this conclusion.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Good stuff. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody online? Go ahead and type them in the chat or ask them out loud. Sasha, thank you for your hearts. All right.
Is it lunchtime yet?
It's lunchtime. I guess people are hungry. If nobody has any questions, we can go ahead and conclude this talk. Ariana, do you have any closing statements you'd like to make before we go?
Stay home.
Stay home.
No, just kidding. We're past that. Just trust public health and inform people to trust public health. We're legit. And if you're interested in pursuing a degree in public health, let Vivi know, and I can hook you up with information about our school, and and get you in touch with the right people and not the wrong people, which I know who the wrong people are.
And that's really important, in learning who's the right people to ask and who the wrong people are. Really, guys, that it makes a huge difference who you ask. I think you guys have learned this by now. So thank you all so much for coming and joining us this time. We thank you and hope that you got a lot out of this, as much as we hope that you
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
Break up routine for me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
Happy weekend.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you all. Oh.